It is 6 o'clock in the morning in the southern reaches of the Florida Everglades, and John Wilson is kneeling in black mud, counting the dead. Not animals, nests. 183 artificial turtle nests, salted across 13 field sites, each one watched through the night by a single wildlife camera. He thumbs back through the footage from the dark hours, and what stops him is not what the cameras caught. It is what they did not catch. No raccoons, no opossums, no wet snouts rooting through the sand for eggs. The trails that should be churned to mud by hungry mammals are smooth and empty and quiet. For 100 generations, these nests would have been torn open before sunrise. This morning, almost every one of them is intact. Wilson sits back on his heels in the shallow water, and a single uneasy thought arrives with the first mosquitoes. Something out here has erased the predators, and whatever erased them is still in the water, watching the same nests he is. The Florida Everglades is not merely a swamp. It is a $31.5 billion economic engine, and it earns that money simply by existing. Clean water and open horizon push the value of surrounding real estate up by $9.2 billion. Boating, fishing, and wildlife tourism generate $8.5 billion more every year. The wetlands and the coastal mangroves absorb storm surge during hurricanes, a service worth $8.4 billion the day a Category 5 makes landfall. Filtration and raw biodiversity account for the rest. And yet, to defend this asset, the state of Florida pays individual hunters $30 an hour to crawl muddy levees at midnight, hunting one camouflaged snake at a time. A $31 billion treasure guarded by people with headlamps and dollar store math. But here is the part nobody scripted. The predator everyone was told would strip this place to a wasteland has done something stranger than destruction. By emptying the marsh of its mid-sized mammals, it has quietly allowed native turtle nests to survive at rates not seen in living memory. The monster did not just take, it rearranged. And to understand how an Asian apex predator came to rule a $31 billion American wetland, you have to go back to the closing decades of the 20th century. The Burmese python, Python bivitatis, did not swim to Florida. It was carried there, in crates and cardboard boxes, by the international exotic pet trade. Through the 1980s and early 90s, thousands of these snakes moved through import warehouses in Miami. They were cheap, they were striking. As hatchlings, barely 20 inches long, they were easy to love. But a 20-inch hatchling becomes a 15-foot animal with the appetite to match, and many overwhelmed owners solved the problem the lazy way. They drove to the edge of the city, opened the trunk, and let the snake slide into the sawgrass. Then came the 24th of August, 1992. Hurricane Andrew came ashore in South Dade County as a Category 5, with sustained winds of 165 miles an hour, and it tore through the region's reptile breeding facilities, releasing an unknown number of captive animals into the wild in a single night. Popular legend treats that night as the origin of the crisis. The records of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission tell a slower, more uncomfortable story. The releases had already been happening for years, and a breeding population was already taking hold. In 1995, biologists near Westlake collected a 7-foot adult alongside a fresh hatchling. By the year 2000, the population no longer needed new arrivals. It was sustaining itself. Today, its range runs from south of Lake Okeechobee down to Key Largo, and from western Broward County clear across to the Gulf Coast of Collier. The state did not surrender quietly. It sent tracking teams into the backcountry. It built contractor networks. It staged public hunts, trained detector dogs to find the scent of reptile scales, and fitted snakes with radio telemetry. The South Florida Water Management District launched its Python Elimination Program, paying contractors an hourly wage plus a bonus measured by the length of every snake they pulled from the marsh. By the spring of 2018, the district announced its 1,000th removed python. On paper, it looked like a bargain, a few $100,000 in wages and incentives, a couple $100 a snake. To pull in the public, the state created the annual Florida Python Challenge, with prize pools reaching tens of thousands of dollars and a grand prize in the 5 figures for the biggest haul. And still, against the sheer size of the place, brute human effort stalled. No hunter could match their camouflage. No bounty could outrun their breeding. No trap could clear millions of acres of trackless water. The snake is cryptic, mobile, and built for exactly this terrain. Finding one adult in that sea of grass is not a search. It is a lottery. If the hidden machinery behind a story like this is the kind of thing you come here for, consider subscribing. This is the work we do. For more than a decade, the public story of the Everglades was uniform catastrophe. A monster was eating everything, and what it left behind was a graveyard. In 2012, a landmark study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences put hard numbers to the loss. Across nearly 57,000 kilometers of night road surveys, raccoon sightings in the southern park had fallen by 99.3%, opossums by 98.9%, bobcats by 87.5%. Marsh rabbits and foxes had effectively vanished. The destruction was real, and it was staggering. But it was not the whole story. In 2017, John Wilson published in the Journal of Applied Ecology, and he reframed the entire crisis. The python was not simply erasing the food web, it was reorganizing it. For generations, raccoons and opossums had been the great destroyers of turtle nests, eating most of the eggs laid in the park before they ever hatched. Strip those mammals out, and something has to give. Wilson's cameras measured it directly. Where pythons had ruled longest, nest predation nearly stopped. Where pythons were absent, nests were still being raided at the old savage rates. The invasion was no longer a simple ledger of loss. It was a marsh rewriting its own rules and writing some native species back in. So what makes this one animal capable of bending an entire ecosystem to its shape? Start with size. The U.S. Geological Survey documented a record Florida female that stretched 17 feet, 7 inches and weighed 164.5 pounds. Inside her, 87 developing eggs. A single clutch can run to 4 dozen, and the hatchlings survive at rates that would make most reptiles jealous. Then there is the hunting. Pythons do not chase. They wait. Their patterned skin dissolves into the shadows of cypress and dead vegetation until they are invisible to prey and researcher alike. Specialized pits along the jaw read infrared, letting them track the body heat of a warm-blooded animal in total darkness. When something steps too close, the strike is instant. Hundreds of backward-curving teeth, then the coils, tightening a fraction with every breath the prey exhales until the blood stops moving. A hinged skull lets them swallow animals far wider than their own heads, including full-grown alligators and adult white-tailed deer. After a meal that size, their own organs swell to digest it. To find an animal this hidden, biologists fight biology with biology. They call it the Judas method. Catch a wild male, implant a radio transmitter, release him. For most of the year, a python is a loner, but in the brief winter breeding season, the males go searching for females, and the tagged traitor leads researchers straight to the massive, egg-heavy females that would otherwise never be seen. There is no victory coming. Every major state and federal agency has quietly retired the word eradication. What is actually holding the line is not a machine the state built. It is a pincer formed by 3 pressures, and only 2 of them are human. The first is the steady grind of professional contractors, keeping the python frontier from creeping into the suburbs. The second is the loud, seasonal theater of the public hunts, designed less to win than to keep the public paying attention. The third pressure arrived without anyone's permission. It is the marsh adjusting itself. The collapse of the nest-raiding mammals has reset the baseline of the southern wetlands, and the surge in turtle nesting success is not a blip. It is a new equilibrium. The Everglades is not healing back into what it was. It is settling into something else, a system where certain natives now thrive because of the invader, and others quietly recede. The money tells the same story of no clean ending. There is no market to bail this out. Commercial python leather and meat never materialized, largely because mercury concentrates in the tissue of an apex predator, making the meat unsafe to eat. So the entire defense runs on public money. The Water Management District and the Wildlife Commission must keep funding contractors year after year. The prize pools of the Python Challenge are not revenue. They are an expense, the cost of buying public attention. The state spends hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to defend a $31 billion asset against an organism that reproduces for free. It is the most lopsided budget in conservation, a permanent public bill against a self-funding invader. And this same pattern is now repeating across the continent, wherever trade and infrastructure have quietly dissolved the natural borders that used to keep species apart. In the Great Lakes, zebra mussels rode in on the ballast water of cargo ships, coated every hard surface, rewrote the water's chemistry, and now cost utilities millions in pipe clearing every year. Across the American South, millions of feral hogs do more than $1 billion in damage annually and breed faster than any hunt can cut them down. Along the Atlantic and through the Caribbean, venomous lionfish have so thoroughly taken over the reefs that managers stopped talking about removal and started talking about permanent culling. The principle underneath all of them is the same. Once an invader sustains itself across a wilderness too vast to police, the fantasy of total control gives way to the arithmetic of management. We do not restore the past. We manage the future we triggered. It is 6 o'clock in the evening now, back in the southern Everglades. The hard noon glare has softened to low gold across the grass, and John Wilson stands up from his line of nests, packing cameras and data sheets into his bag. The marsh around him is quiet, settling into an evening without the rustle of the small mammals that used to own the night. He knows that under the dark water and inside the thick brush, the real owners are beginning to wake. We like to picture an ecosystem as a fragile machine, something that breaks for good the moment a foreign part is forced into it. The Everglades is making a different argument. It did not break, it adapted. While the state keeps spending public money to hold a line that cannot be held, the landscape behind that line has already moved on and built a new balance around the one animal it was never supposed to contain. So here is the question worth sitting with. Is it time for conservation to stop fighting for a past it cannot recover and start managing the altered future it actually has?